bring the Butte-Silver Bow Council of Commissioners regular meeting to order for Wednesday, February 5th, 2025. Have a roll call.
10 present, 1 presiding, 1 absent.
Thank you. Please let the record reflect Commissioner Anderson is excused tonight, and Chief Executive Gallagher is out of town this evening, and so I'll be running the meeting on his behalf. Commissioner Walker, would you please lead us in the prayer and the pledge?
Almighty God, we implore you, look upon us and guide us this night as we make decisions which so greatly affect our community, Butte-Silver Bow. Direct our thoughts, words, and deeds so that we please you and best serve our fellow citizens.
Amen.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Next item on tonight's agenda is any public comment on any items on the agenda. If there is a member of the public that would like to speak on any item on the agenda, now would be your opportunity. If you would please just come up to the podium and state your name and address for the record and which communication you are referring to, that would be great. Right, yep. And then there's a button on the bottom of that microphone on the base. There you go. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Dave Williams. I live at 2731 Princeton Street, right down the street from Whittier School. I'm the president of the Citizens Technical Environmental Committee, CTEC, which is EPA's Technical Assistance Grant recipient here in Butte. We work with Butte-Silver Bow, EPA, Montana DEQ, Atlantic Richfield, pretty much all the key players to work on Superfund stuff, explaining it, going over some of the issues. I'm just here to express my support for the Butte-Silver Bow letter to EPA regarding the new lead standards, and also to say that CTEC will be sending a letter which will cover many of the same points. And I also want to highlight the fact that as a grant recipient from the federal government, if you think Trump's canceling federal grants won't impact Butte, think again, because they very well might. That's what I have. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak on any item on tonight's agenda? Please state your name and address for the record.
My name's Joe Griffin. I live at 1121 West Diamond. I'm here to speak to the county's comments on the proposed plan. I've been in this environmental game since 1990. I've worked on Anaconda site and I've worked on the Butte site. Originally I was a consultant in a company working for ARCO. I later became the project manager for DEQ for this site. I spent a lot of time working on and looking at the RMAP program. I'm part of CTEC as well. We've got our own comments that'll be going in, but I hear a lot of misinformation out there about the relationship between the county and the RMAP program and Atlantic Richfield. There really isn't anything unseemly in that working relationship because overseeing it is EPA in consultation with DEQ. And EPA calls all the shots. I think it's a good thing that this county will be turning in comments. I think the comments go beyond what's in the proposed plan and requests additional work be done. And I would just like to appeal to all of you. I think you need to do it tonight or skip it. But I really appeal to you all to really have respect for the RMAP program, and in particular, Eric Hassler. Like I said, when I first became a project officer for DEQ, I went to Eric and I said, I want to shadow you. I want to see how this program works. And I followed him into houses and into backyards and really started seeing how it works. I've never, I still have a strong relationship with Eric. So I would just appeal to you to just defer actually to what you've gotten from Eric. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other member of public? Mr. Ringsack.
Chairman Morgan, Commissioners, County Attorney Enruth. I'm Elton Ringsock and I reside at 3310 Hannibal Street, Butte, Montana, and I've been a resident here for 48 years. And I'd like to speak to the proposed changes to the existing remedy for the residential soils and dust. The EPA has proposed changes for the lead cleanup in residential soils in Butte, and remedial design and construction, including collection and evaluation of significant amounts of data. The existing remedy has been modified twice. It was first agreed to in a ROD between John Sesso and ARCO, and this is where it first shows up back in 2011. In the 2020 consent decree and allocation agreement also is there, and it did not alter the current boundaries as it was approved in 2020 of the BPSOU. In the 2011 explanation of significant differences that the EPA sounded, it expanded the RMAP. It expanded the RMAP area again in the 2020 ROD. The 2020 ROD is amended. It specifically noted that residential soils inside the 2019 RMAP expansion area would only be sampled on an as-requested basis. The 2020 Universal Agreement order from EPA to BP amendment directed that BP and its subsidiary ARCO in Butte-Silver County develop and implement the expanded RMAP plan and medical monitoring consistent with the 2020 ROD amended for the BPSOU. The EPA at this time also recommends expanding the BPSOU. The EPA held an open house up at Montana Tech on October 29th that was full of good information and well presented. And then it had a public meeting on November 18th, 2024. And at that meeting, that's when they announced that they were going to do 15 years to do the research and get it done, and 25 years to complete the project, which is totally unacceptable. So at that time, there was a limited 60-day period for comment from the 24th of November until December, January. Anyway, Butte-Silver has never held a public meeting on this expansion plan. And Mr. Hasler's comments, when you presented them to you, were on the consent decree, on the consent agenda for approval by the council. At that point, the county had not made any outreach to the public in Butte, Montana. At that time, that's when Evan, Mr. Barrett, brought up his concerns to you, the council, and I commend you for listening to him and extending the period for comment and for people to get involved and find out what's going on. The time required for completing the work needed due to all these proposed changes as compared to the existing remedy will extend the period of disruption to this community. Additional crews will be needed to support the updated timeframes to complete the sampling within 15 years and the remediation of the residential soils in 25 years from 2024 from now. The plan proposes a new cleanup level of 175 parts per million, and that's absolutely great. 100 parts is a national average. I'd like to see that, but 175 is much, much better than what we got, replacing the current levels of 1,200 parts per million. It expands the BPSOU boundary by 3,637 acres, and it includes an additional 7,253 homes. This extends the time frame to complete the residential cleanups. And it says in the agreement, there are no changes to current construction practices. Standard equipment, such as excavators and trucks, will continue to be used to clean up the residential areas. When they released the proposed plan, it was a 60 days public period, and that ran from October 16th through December 16th. The EPA received a lot of calls, comments, and requests, and I know the council had some comments and requests too, and they extended the comment period to February 14th. So people now have, and people need to comment until the 14th. But this is the part that tends to really bother me, is the extent of the expansion and the amount of work required is phenomenal. And back when the original agreement was made, Butte-Silver became the contractor. This is the only EPA site in the country where one of the participants in the action is the contractor. The EPA, by law and by circular, is required to find contractors to do the work that's necessary. And BP, by the law, is required to pay the costs for those contractors. If BP refuses to pay those costs, under CERCLA, there are triple damages. So if BP says, we don't want you to hire them, and we won't do it, there's triple damages in the law. What that means to me is Hasler and his crew have done outstanding work for the last considerable period of time, but they've done 49 houses a year, 640 houses since the program started. Now we're talking 6,000, 7,000 houses. There are contractors in this country that will come in and do that work, and it won't take them 15 years or 25 years to do it. But EPA, you have to, in your comments to EPA, say 15 years is unacceptable, 25 years is unacceptable. We want you to find a contractor that can do it in less than double digits, 9 years or less. And the costs would be rather extensive. But you know, any good engineer, and was in the Corps of Engineers for 17 years. I did a project that took an elephant trail through the jungles and the mountains to the Ashaw Valley, 31 miles, and we did it in 81 days. But I had no limit on my personnel. I had 5 companies behind me. I had no limits to my money. I lost a dozer a week. But if you want to put the money and the equipment and the personnel to work, you can crash any engineering project you have and reduce it by at least 50%. BP's gross profits in 2023 were $66 billion. Last year they had a tough year. They only made $56 billion last year. In the last 3 years, they made a total of $220 billion profits in that company. If you triple the costs, and currently they're saying the costs are $133 million to complete it in a 15 and 25 year period of time. Triple that, $450 million, and EPA could direct this, is 0.0245% of what BP had to pay for the oil spill in the Caribbean, in the Mexican Sea. They spent $66 billion cleaning that up. They can sure come up with 0.25% of that amount of money to make sure Butte-Silver has a clean future for the next several generations. And I thank you very much for the opportunity to speak, and thanks for what you do.
Thank you. Is there any other member of the public that would like to speak on any item on the agenda? Please state your name and address for the record.
Mr. Chairman, I'm Eric Nyland, 312 West Porphyry. Thank you for the opportunity. Thrilled to be here and have my First Amendment rights back. Before I start, it's good to see Joe Griffin here, and I was reminded as he was talking to introduce this. Joe had an oral history he did with Project Veritas, and it's on the Archives website, pretty cool. And one of the remarks or accounts he relays is a state attorney who was pretty upset with Butte-Silver talking about John Sesso, sacrificing, cleanup. All those guys in Butte care about is money. And Joe said, "You're darn right they do." And that's the root of our problem here, and that's why we're here. And thank you for the opportunity. The choice before you is a lot more simple than it's being portrayed. And this isn't personal. These personal attacks and the need to defend, it's not the case. That's choice. Since you guys were all on the response from the chief executive to the Butte watchdogs, I'd like to point out a couple of things the experts he referred to have overlooked, and it's relevant to the draft letter you're considering. It's not the responsibility of Butte-Silver to solve problems for British Petroleum or the EPA. For example, questions about where yard waste will go, they're not relevant to this particular action for the people of Butte. But notes about existing repositories, they're nothing more than self-imposed limits. I picked up the phone and I had a conversation with Mark Thompson at Montana Resources. They're not only open to taking contaminated topsoil from residential remediation, they're going to need that material for their own mine reclamation. Nobody has called them and asked them. But we're going to raise this as a comment to EPA when we can't even do our base homework before commenting on it. This is not about repositories. This is about protection. And it can be discussed after EPA comes up with the final plan. Those things are worked out after. This is about the lead level. 2 weeks ago, you all heard from Director Hassler, and he raised all kinds of issues why he can't do things faster. He indicated that he set a policy where waste in Butte has to stay in Butte. Why? It's not the case with everything. There's plenty of waste from Butte sitting right now in the Opportunity Ponds. Why now would it apply to this? It's absurd. DEQ is planning on putting some stuff out by Ramsey in Opportunity Ponds in the near future. Decades ago, some staff members in Butte-Silver they saw an opportunity to get some money from British Petroleum, and they essentially placed our local government in place of a contractor. Since then, the pace of the cleanup has been limited by the local government and the resources from British Petroleum. Other Superfund sites don't have this situation. Local governments don't step up into that role. EPA orders the polluters to clean up, and EPA contracts the work out and bills them if they don't get it done. The decision isn't part of the consent decree, remains part of a unilateral order, which I would urge you to resist. Not only should we all be concerned about the slow pace of cleanup, but inserting ourselves into a position of absorbing liability for a foreign corporation seems foolish to me. Whatever reasons this body had to voluntarily agree to be a settling defendant for stormwater, that's done, it's behind us. So it is what it is. And despite the claims made by the chief executive before this body, Butte-Silver was not formally named a PRP until 2020, unless the U.S. attorney lied to a federal judge. And it's imperative this body considers the impacts of these rushed decisions before putting the taxpayers further on the hook for British Petroleum's liabilities. But the proposal from EPA is very straightforward. It's a more protective standard for lead, and it's proposed, final details can be worked out. The letter you were presented to initially by the staff, it asserts a more prominent role than CERCLA calls for a local government. The questions, they're obstacles that British Petroleum and EPA will have to sort out. Asserting a role from the policymaking body, which is you, that assumes responsibility of a cleanup is self-limiting, and it places artificial barriers between the people of Butte and a timely cleanup. Those questions can come from a department or individuals, or more appropriately, British Petroleum. The chief executive's email to the Butte watchdogs is sadly mistaken because we are citizens, and in Montana and the US for that matter, we have a right and a responsibility to petition our government. It isn't Moscow. A comment from a local government asserting a policy of putting people first with specific notes for inclusion in the final plan to protect human health, that's appropriate. And as a citizen, I'm asking you to put people before the side deals with British Petroleum. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
Don Patrice, 2804 White Boulevard. I'm not here to give you a lot of statistics or facts or anything. The three things I have to say to you is I have 3 grandchildren. And I would hope that some of you have grandchildren, children, or nieces and nephews. But under the proposed of the EPA of 15 to 25, 15 years to continue on and then 25 for remediation, it's 40 years. My grandchildren will be approaching 50 years old, for God's sakes. You as a board, you as an entity, I would hope that you would impress upon them that our citizens need this cleanup quicker than that. And I agree with Mick that it needs to be in single digits. My grandchildren at 10, 11, and 13 years old shouldn't be approaching their 50s before this cleanup is done. Thank you for your time and efforts in this whole project. Thank you.
Thank you. Please state your name and address for the record.
I'm Mickey Boyza. I live at 2540 South Montana Street in Butte. I've lived here my whole life, and we raised our children here, and they raised our grandchildren here, and that makes me so sad because I don't want my grandchildren to come back here and have babies if that's what is going to happen to this community, is to have to wait 40 years for things to be cleaned up. They should have been cleaned up long before this, but they haven't been. And I'm going to ask you to think of the good of the children of this town, the children that could be born in this town, coming up to have to be born into a situation that they had no control over and can cause them a deficit in themselves. I would encourage you to push to have this done in single-digit numbers. It's been way far too long going on, and I would really appreciate you to think about the good of the kids of this town and the ones that could be born here. Thank you for your time, and thank you for your efforts.
Thank you. Any other member of the public that would like to speak on any items on the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, members of the council, my name is Evan Barrett. I live at 807 West Silver Street here in Butte, retired here on the Butte Hill. And again, as I often say, thank you for your service. You know, we were just talking over here, hey, maybe, you know, you like doing this stuff, maybe I'd run for council of commissioners. I'm not crazy, you know. You really have to work hard to do your job, and you have your regular job usually in front of that. So your efforts are appreciated, and the constraints on what you can do as a council are appreciated. It's under that basis that we submitted the letter to you yesterday morning that had specific language, because at the last session, Mr. Chairman, it was you or someone said to Eric Hassler, have you had any input? And it seemed you were kind of thrashing around, well, what do we do with this? We got all this language here, you know, and we're kind of reliant upon the staff. Have you had any input? And he said, well, substantially no. Well, we've come here repeatedly and given input. We didn't write exact language, we just gave input, but the language didn't change much. There were improvements in the second version that you got, but it still left a lot to be desired. Now, there are two things, and that's the reason we drafted. We thought, well, okay, we'll give them the exact words, at least to consider putting into the document. And so that was what was sent to you. And so I want to address with you two things. One is the form of your response, and one is the substance of the response. Okay, in the form of the response, from the minute I first approached you, was you're making a bad mistake when you integrate all these, it was then I think 23 or 26 questions in the middle of this document. It read like a dime novel, you know. And so I provided to Eric yesterday morning after submitting the thing to the council, the language that I thought needed to be in the body of a comment to EPA. I submitted to Eric, well, I've extracted the questions. The questions detract from your message. Eric has told me, well, I want those answered. Well, ask them, but you don't have to ask them in the middle of your assertions. What, as I said in the note to you yesterday, the comment should be what you like, what you don't like, what do you want,
What will you insist upon? And maybe what you might even be demanding about. We're not here to kiss EPA's fanny. We're here to try to make their plan better for Butte. And it needs to be explicit, clear and uncluttered. So in terms of the form of what you have, this form is substantially the form of the first draft. The improvement in the second draft was they put 3 things at the top, and then the rest of it was still this mishmash of questions, and it was just kind of messy. And it looks like it's still messy. Thank you for your efforts to this point. Now, so let me just say, I think the form is wrong. And I think you maybe even have some times before the 14th, before 11:59 on the 14th, when the email deadline ends, to fix that form. And I would recommend that you take the questions out and leave the assertions and the substance in the forefront of the comment. Now, as for the content, we're all on board. The little thing we put up that said, get the lead out now, not in 25 to 40 years. Well, that's sunk in on everybody. There's nobody here disagrees with that. And that's great. And thank you, Butte-Silver, for agreeing on shortening the time frame. But let's not get wimpy about it right at the last. If you don't ask, you don't get. If you ask for 5, you get 10. You ask for 10, you get 15. It's in the interest of British Petroleum to delay spending money. That's what they're very good at, delaying spending money. Why do you think Eric was standing here a week ago saying, well, I got a problem. I can't find contractors. I can't find workers. I'll tell you one thing he can't find, enough money to do it either. Because they're not going to give a bunch of money unless they're told to spend the money. And they're not going to shorten the time frame, So I think one of the amendments, I've talked to a number of the members here, not nearly everybody by any chance at all, but an amendment to say, well, why don't we make it 10 years and finish it in 15? I'd recommend shortening that, change that. Well, say 7 and 10 then. If somebody has told you it can't be done in 5 years, so we got to do 10, or it can't be done in 10 years, we got to do 15, let me suggest to you, go for something and ask for more than, because they're never going to go short if you don't ask them to go short. And so that's what I would do. I would shorten it even still. And I know, Russell, you might have an amendment, and I like the looks of the amendment, but I don't like the numbers in the amendment. Now, I feel for the county and the RMAC program. They've gotten into an allocation agreement that has them doing the RMAC program. It's an allocation agreement that most of us have ever had a hard time finding and a hard time reading. But I will say this, when the chief executive came in 4 years ago, he said, we're going to get this thing renegotiated. We're 4 years later. And the answer is, by the way, well, we haven't had any negotiation meetings yet in 4 years. Well, he's locked into a system. We all know the system has not worked. I'm not saying the work's bad, the pace of the work, what they can do with the resources they've been given. EPA and BP have effectively dumped the responsibility onto you without the resources or the requirements of doing it in a timely and they want an effective thing doing. Let's say it's effective, okay? But what about the timeliness? Not enough resources. Demand the resources. Don't ask little questions about it. We need the resources. We don't want to have the spending be too high. So now, as to the rest, and so Eric's plea should be remembered. He doesn't have the resources. He doesn't have the contractors. Well, are we to suffer for that? Who's responsible for that? Not you. You're not responsible for it unless they've made you legally responsible for it, and that would be a mistake. BP is responsible for it. They got the money, and they should be demanded to be doing it, and your letters should demand that of EPA so they can demand it of British Petroleum. Now, a couple quick things. I boiled it down when we sent you the other day, boiled it down to the core issues, which you had already invested yourself in. The expansion of the boundary. I noticed that it looks like you're going along with it. We'll add Census Tract 2. Our recommendation is do the whole Summit Valley. Some of you have homeowners in your districts. They'll say, well, why wasn't I eligible? Guess what came over the hill from Anaconda? All that stuff from the smelter? It didn't stop at street number this. This whole valley sucked it up. Okay, so I would recommend you change that to adding the whole Summit Valley. Additional time, we've addressed that already. Clearly, not only we don't want there to be any impacts, we don't want any costs for Butte-Silver Bow. None. Zippo. Don't even think about it. Say it clearly. Waste disposal. Don't want to go into it in great detail. But get it out of this urban center and get it out of the county even if you can. There's a huge area to do it. It's been done before for our waste. Lots of our waste is over there. We can have another session on that later. So finally, let me say that I have a feeling you're going to adopt what the staff gave you with the minor adjustments. I would ask some of you council members to take a look at what we submitted and see if some of that language could be supplanted. That's what you're here to do. Secondly, at minimum, if this is like the trucks going down the road and get out of the way, and I've had to deal with that many a time, so when it gets like that, I step out of the way. But take a look at the summary that we sent to you. Because if nothing else, you should lift the summary that was done by your staff and replace it with this summary. Because what it says is that it generally support BIPSU with the reduction of the 25-year time frame to a single-digit years, the inclusion of the entire Summit Valley in the area to be cleaned of lead, the reduction of the risk-based level. Remember we talked about nice to go to 175 instead of 1,200. Ask them for 100. It's the national standard. Unless they can prove it doesn't, you couldn't use it. Guarantees of no cost to the Butte taxpayers, explicitly stated. A commitment to look outside Butte-Silver Bow for waste repository stays. Firm statements that Butte-Silver Bow is absolutely not responsible for lead getting into the soil and buildings and absolutely not responsible for cleanup. Those are the things that ought to be in a summary. Butte-Silver Bow looks forward to collaborating with EPA and stakeholders. So that summary can encapsulate the essence of what you're telling. Remember, if you're going to carry a message through to somebody, you got to be clear about it. You got to be concise about it. You got to be strong about it. And you can't bury and look for diamonds in a haystack, which is what essentially this thing as it was written now does. So we urge you to do better. We appreciate your efforts and your willingness to listen to us. We will be submitting our comments directly to the EPA and urging others to do as well. And what we hope for is the best for Butte in all of this. And thank you all for your service.
Thank you. Any other public comment on any item on tonight's agenda? Please state your name and address for the record.
Good evening. I'm Alan Kesselheim. I live at 1302 West Platinum. I wanted to say a few things about the RMAP program. I just had my attic remediated. I've owned my house for 5 years now. And I just wanted to say that the process was actually pretty heartening. I felt like the RMAP people were very responsive. They always returned my phone calls quickly. They showed up when they said they were going to show up. They were efficient. They were competent. They were careful, very considerate. They did a great job and were very professional. So I commend the work that's being done and the style in which it's being done. There's a couple of, I know this whole hubbub about 25 years and the new lead standards and all that has kind of put RMAP under the microscope. So I wanted to kind of start with that saying that they are acting in a professional manner. In terms of getting it done more quickly, which of course everybody would like, I think there's a couple things to consider. First of all, that this is a voluntary program and people have to call up and get their place tested, get the results, and then schedule the remediation. A lot of people aren't doing that. The fact that it took 5 years for my house to get remediated is not RMAP's problem, it's my problem. I put it on the back burner. I didn't get around to it. It was only when I saw a neighbor's house being done, I got the number off the truck that I called him up and started doing it. Once it started, it was pretty darn efficient. So I think that's one problem that maybe needs to be addressed, and think about being more aggressive about soliciting people to get it done, encouraging people, maybe taking neighborhoods and saying, well, we're doing this neighborhood this month, get on it. And just have people come in and start signing up for it. So that's one issue. The other thing that I think takes a long time is the testing. The laboratory results. Ours took about 2.5 weeks. It was the longest waiting period we had in the whole process. I think when there were even more demand for it, we did it in the wintertime. But during the summertime, when they're doing a lot more of them, it's probably even a longer time, maybe a month. So if there's a way to either shorten the lab testing time, or even in areas where it's pretty certain that people are going to qualify, just don't even do the lab testing. Just go in and do the house, clean it. So I think there's some things that we can do proactively to help change that time frame. It's all well and good to get up and just pound your fists and say, we got to make it happen sooner. But you start doing the math and you take thousands and thousands of homes, you factor in weekends, you factor in the winter months, and it's pretty daunting to get all those homes done in a really short period of time. I mean, our house took, between the people coming to clean it, having an electrician come in and get our electricity back up to code, and then having them come back and do the insulation again, it took about 10 days. So even without having to do the wiring again, I'd say it was a really solid work week. So it's not a small thing. Each house is its own little puzzle that they have to solve. So I think it's easy to just say, we got to get it done sooner and throw whatever resources are necessary at it. But you start doing the math and it gets a little bit daunting. So I think there's some proactive things we can do, both in terms of the testing of samples and in terms of encouraging and maybe even kind of mandating some public responsibility in terms of actually getting yourself signed up for the program, in addition to adding some resources as necessary. So anyway, I just wanted to make my comment about my recent experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other public comment on any item on tonight's agenda? Okay, seeing none, I'll move to the approval of the minutes for December 23rd, 2024, special meeting minutes, and January 22nd, 2025 regular meetings. Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. At this time, I'd like to make a motion to approve the minutes from December 23rd, 2024 special meeting and January 22nd, 2025 regular meeting.
Okay, made and seconded to approve the minutes of December 23rd, 2024 and January 22nd, 2025. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
10 yea, 0 nay.
Thank you. Motion passes. Items not addressed on the agenda. We don't have any to present tonight. Chief Executive's report. I'll let that one go tonight as well. I'll move right into section 1, the bid openings, public hearing and or presentations. Public hearing, communication number 2025-48 and communication 25-60. On number 2, 25-60, there was a publication error, so we will not be holding that public hearing tonight. So County Attorney Enruth, is there proof of publication for communication 2025-48?
Commissioner Morgan, yes, there is proof of publication for communication number 2025-48.
Okay, thank you. Communication 25-48, Karen Burns, Community Development Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization to schedule a public hearing on February 5th, 2025 regarding a grant from the National Park Services in the amount of $750,000 for the addition of unanticipated revenue for the 24-25 budget. Staff report, Ms. Burns.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan, members of council. I am Karen Burns, Director of Community Development. Tonight we're holding a public hearing to talk about amending the budget mid-year, and this is related to the Paul Brune grant that was received by our office and the City County of Butte-Silver Bow from the National Park Service. And I'm going to let Kate McCourt, our Historic Preservation Officer, just tell you a little bit about that grant, and then we're really excited to be able to start working on it once we get the budget amended. So, thank you.
Ms.
Hello.
McCourt.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Commissioners. My name is Kate McCourt, Historic Preservation Officer for Butte-Silver Bow. I thought I would just read you a short description that comes directly from the RFP that we just put out. It will be more concise than me kind of rambling on about it. And it gives you the gist of what we're hoping to accomplish with this grant. The Butte-Silver Bow Historic Revitalization Project hopes to help motivate and invigorate owners of properties that have commercial and residential promise but have stagnated due to the point of vacancy, and county-enforced mothballing to reinvest in their buildings. BSB would like to see boards removed from windows, storefronts re-inhabited, and upper floors adaptively reused for much-needed, cost-effective living spaces. So this is essentially a grant that we received for the community. We can't use it on any Butte-Silver Bow properties. It's for income-producing properties, commercial buildings specifically that are within and contributing to our landmark district. We'd like to look for adaptive reuse projects to get upper stories of buildings that have sat vacant, inhabited by pigeons, and get some work done on those. So we would also like to focus specifically on buildings that have been compromised due to code violations, need fire suppression, electrical updates, things of that nature to make them economically viable again.
Okay. Anything else, Ms. Burns? Nothing? Okay. Does any of the commissioners have any questions? Okay. Seeing none, at this time I'll open the public hearing. If there's any member of the public that would like to be a proponent for communication 25-48, now would be your opportunity. Second call for proponents on 25-48. Third and final call for proponents. Seeing none, I'll move to opponents on communication 25-48. If there's any member that would like to speak as an opponent to 25-48, now would be your opportunity. Second call. Third and final call for 25-48. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing. Number 2, communication 25-60. Again, we are not holding this public hearing as there was an issue with the publication of it. So Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. At this time, I would like to make a motion to place on file communication number 2025-60.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded just to place communication 2025-60 on file. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Would anyone like to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
10 yea, 0 nay.
Thank you. Motion passes. Section 2, the consent agenda. A, the committee reports 1 through 4, and B, communication 1 through 25. Is there any friendly amendments or segregations? Commissioner O'Leary.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to... I'd like to segregate communication 2025-18.
That's out of the Committee of the Whole, Commissioner?
Correct.
Okay. Any other friendly amendments or segregations? Okay, seeing none, Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. At this time, I would like to make a motion to approve the committee reports, section 1 through 4. Let's see. Section B, communications 1 through 25, with the exception of communication number 2025-18, number 5, out of the committee of the whole report.
Okay, there's been a motion made and seconded to approve the consent agenda A, the committee reports 1 through 4, with the exclusion of number 5, 2025-18 out of the committee of the whole, and regular communications 1 through 25. Is there anything on the question? Would everyone please vote? Okay, would anyone like to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
10 yea, 0 nay.
Thank you. Motion passes. Motion passes. Going to the segregated item in the committee of the whole. Number 5, Communication 2025-18, Eric Hassler, Reclamation and Environmental Services Director, requesting Council of Commissioners authorization for the Chief Executive Gallagher to submit comments on EPA's proposed plan to amend the remedial action for Butte Priority Soils Operable Unit, BIPSU, proposed plan, October 2024. Commissioner O'Leary.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. After hearing lots of public input from the folks sending emails and calling and speaking at the meetings, we had a chance to talk about this several times over the last couple weeks, but I feel like there are a few things in our letter that we are considering that could be altered to better reflect some of the needs of our community. I spent quite a bit of time over the last couple days talking with staff and people who I trust who are, been part of Superfund for a lot of years, and I made a few edits to the letter that I'd like to see adopted. Each of the commissioners should have a copy of my suggested edits on their desk tonight. For the members of the public, please understand my goal in doing these edits is to thread a needle. I recognize that everybody in the community has varying opinions on these things. My goal in doing these is to incorporate a lot of the ideas that you all have had into the letter that we have been presented with. So primarily, the purpose of these changes revolves around a few key points. First, I think we should define a specific timeline that we should expect the remediation activities to be completed in. I think everybody recognizes in this community that it is very complex, and without all the perfect information and all the details, it's really difficult to get a realistic timeline that works for everybody. But that shouldn't mean that we are not pushing for a timeline that matches with our expectations of the community. Second, our questions should be asking a bit more detail. Several of the questions have been modified to reflect that. Third, we should be emphasizing abandoning the idea of permanently placing removed waste in residential areas. I know this sparks a lot of strong feelings, but at the end of the day, I think it's a reasonable ask to not be putting waste in somebody else's backyard. Finally, these changes, they cannot create financial burden for Butte-Silver Bow or the citizens of Butte and taxpayers of Butte. So the commissioners have a copy in front of them with the edits that I've suggested. I'd like to read the edits into the record. Just for clarity, I'm going to read the edit, read the line of the edit. I put line numbers on the edits, and then I will read what the edit is. The first edit is in section 3 of the initial priority comments, lines 51 through 56. striking a significantly shorter period of time, and then I'll just read the whole paragraph. The Butte community is unwilling to support this time frame and expects the agency to reevaluate the proposed timeline and develop plans to complete at least 80% of the required remedial activities in 10 years or less and fully complete no later than 15 years. If BP ARCO indicates that it cannot perform the remediation activities in a time frame that is protective to the people of Butte, then the EPA should perform the cleanup and collect the costs as provided by CERCLA sections 104, 106, and 107. A shorter time frame should not come at the cost of a quality cleanup. The next edit is in additional comments, section 1, lines 70 through 73. This is the two first questions. Question A should read, did agency consider the health risks to the public of leaving impacted properties for this proposed additional extended period of time? Adding in proposed in that sentence, and then additionally, if so, what health risks were identified? Question B, does the agency plan to require prioritization of high-risk demographic groups? Adding in, if so, how does the agency plan to prioritize these groups? The next edit is on line 79, which is question E in that same section. Has a similar implementation timeframe been used at a comparable Superfund site and found to be protective, efficient, and effective? And the addition is, if so, where? Next edit is in section 5 of the additional questions. Lines 116 and 117, striking the word find in 116 just to remove a duplicate word there. But this sentence should read, historically, the siting and approval for potential repository locations has been a lengthy process. Butte-Silver Bow strongly suggests that the agency identify additional repository space to avoid impacting the remedial timeframe, and adding in the sentence, and abandon proposals to permanently place removed waste in residential areas. The last edit is in the summary, which is last page, lines 141 through 146. And first thing is to strike in summary at the beginning of that paragraph and just put a heading in line 141 that just says summary. And then the paragraph will read, Butte-Silver Bow generally supports the BIPSU proposed plan with the addition of Census Tract 6 to the expanded BIPSU boundary and a striking significantly reduced reduction to the 25-year timeline, and adding timeline of 80% completion in 10 years or less, with all remediation being completed within 15 years. Additionally, the costs of the proposed changes should not have a negative financial impact on the citizens of Butte-Silver Bow or the county. And that's the end of the edits. I guess at this time I'll make a motion to approve the letter as it's been amended and place on file. Is that the correct motion? Yeah.
Second. Do I have a second? Sorry. Second, Commissioner Shea. Okay. There is a motion on the floor to concur with communication 2025-18 as amended by Commissioner O'Leary's suggestions. It was seconded. Anything on the question? Is there any commissioners that have any questions? Commissioner Fisher on the question.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Thank you, Council Member O'Leary. I find the letter to be kind of what we're looking for, but after hearing public comment tonight, I think there's a few things in the letter that should be addressed a little differently. I'm not happy with the time frame of 10 years, 80%, and then 15 years. I'm not happy with that. And I think there's too many questions, that if so, how does the agency plan to prioritize these groups? I'm not certain we're going to get answers from the EPA on some of these questions. I think we got to go with a more definitive statement of what we're actually actually asking for. You know, and I'm going to get off the subject here, if it'd be okay with you, Chairman Morgan, for a minute. It's still on the subject, but what they're asking to do is to amend the record of decision. That's what they want to do. So we've been going through this for 30 some odd years, close to 40 years. So we've been amending this record of decision all along, you know, the consent decree. You remember you were here about 213 when I came in. And, you know, the thing about this, we keep going through these amendments and we keep getting these little things to come along, you know. And the consent decree was 1,300 pages, 52 indexes and addendums and stuff like that. You know, we still don't know what the heck's going on in this. We never did know what's going on with the consent decree. I mean, most people still aren't sure what happened at the record of decision, the allocations, I mean. And the thing is, putting this burden back on Silver County, and I mean, Eric Hassler does a great job, I'm not getting there. But as Evan said earlier, the funding's not there. We're not getting the money to do it. Every cent that ARCO BP has given us, or EPA has told them to give us, has been given to us with strings attached. The SARTA fund, $15 million. We can't spend that as we see fit. It's got contingencies in there for historical, everything like that. Now we're getting a $20 million building over here for a community center, you know, that now I'm understanding it's got pickleball courts in it and stuff like that. You know, when are we going to stop taking this piecemeal? And I'm going to make a statement here, and it's just the way I feel, and it's my opinion. I think it's time to figure out how much it's going to cost to do this cleanup. How much total is going to be to get this cleanup done? It's going to be $1 billion, whatever it is. And maybe it's time ARCO gives us the money, being they're putting all the burden on us to you know, have our reclamation department do all the work. Maybe it's time for us to say, give us the money and let us spend it as we want. For 40 years now, we've been piecemealing. 10 million here, 15 million there. You know, we're not getting anywhere. We're never going to clean up this whole site. It's never going to happen. I mean, talk to people that have been doing it. Mick Ringsack, Evan Barrett, Eric Nyland, Fritz Daly, Moose Patrice. These people have been doing this for a long time. We're not getting anywhere. We're not getting nothing cleaned up. I'll be dead in 15 years. I've been fighting this battle for 12 years. We're not getting anywhere. So I think, in my opinion, we should revise this letter. I think Commissioner O'Leary done a great job, but I think we should revise this letter and get a little more affirmative action and tell them what we want instead of asking what they're going to do. You know, I don't think we should be asking questions. We should be telling them what we want. And that's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. There is a motion on the floor. Is there any other questions? Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Commissioner O'Leary, I very much appreciate the work that you put into this letter. I know that you reached out to, I mean, you at least reached out to me. I'm sure you reached out to the other commissioners as well. I believe that you went to the sources that you needed. My concern only on the timeline is, yes, everybody, as we've all discussed in this room, believes that the timeline of the 25 years is not suitable, obviously. I guess my question is, and maybe this is just a thought more so, but I guess how are we to determine the feasibility of any timeline if we set one? You know, like if we're setting this at 15 years and have really no idea how long, or 10 years, how long it could take. I know Mr. Ringsack alluded to that we hire outside contractors and do those things, and while that's not a bad idea, we still don't understand how long. I don't think EPA understands. I don't think we understand. I just think that I just don't want to be in a position where if we set a timeline where it ends up being detrimental to us. I do appreciate it, and frankly, I will vote to approve this as amended because I do appreciate your work, and I think you did a really good job. I just thought that should be food for thought. I just don't know how we are to determine the feasibility of any timeline just yet. And as a reminder, this is just a letter. I mean, this isn't anything that's going to be set in stone. EPA will respond to us as far as I'm aware. I think that they have to, as far as I'm aware. But that is just where I'm at. Again, I just want to let you know I really appreciate you doing this. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Thatcher. Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Commissioner Thatcher, brings up a really great point. And I would like to ask Director Hassler if he could remind us what is the basis for the 25-year timeline that is talked about in the proposed plan.
Director Hassler.
Chairman Morgan, members of the council, The basis is the properties that were within the new proposed boundary and an exceedance rate of approximately 60% of those properties. That's how the EPA developed their cost estimate and the time frame associated with it. As Commissioner Thatcher alluded to, we are asking for a larger boundary. We have data that we don't think 60% is correct. We think that that looks closer to 80% of the properties will be. It kind of goes to where it's very hard to define a timeline when you don't know what the scope of work is at this point in time. And that is the biggest issue. That's the basis of our questions within this, is we need to have the answers to those questions to know what the scope truly is going forward, so that we can figure out a way to effectively and efficiently implement this project in our community. Right now, we do not know enough. The data is just not there at this point in time, or we're calling out questions with the data that they utilized. So.
Follow up, Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Director Hassler. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What assumptions did they make in calculating the timeline in regard to the resources that were available to do the work?
Director Hassler.
Chairman Morgan, Councilman Shea, I don't know. They did not specify that in there, other than, as you can see, they used a 60% exceedance rate. They took 11,000 homes at 60%, what was remaining that hasn't been addressed at this point in time, and just did the simple math. I do not know what kind of exercise they put into it in regards to the staffing requirements, the materials requirements, any of those. I mean, again, that's why we pose the questions that we do.
One more, please.
One more, Commissioner Shea.
If I may. I would like that question answered, honestly. I know we're up against a timeline, but that is a question I'd like to ask them. What assumptions did they make as far as the resources to come to a 25-year timeline? Because there had to be some sort of assumption made there. And I think it's fair to say that we could back into the timeline that we prefer and figure out, not we, but they could back into that timeline. We all agree in this room, and I know you do too, that timeline is ridiculous. Human health isn't protected now, obviously. And so the longer we drag it out, the longer human health is not protected. That's why we're cleaning it up. So the timeline is unacceptable. I still disagree with the 80% completion in 10 years, although it's much better than what we had. And again, like Mr. Barrett said, you ask for more than what you think you'll get. I'm comfortable lowering that into a single digit. I also am not a scientist, but I do know that we do have the power to ask for those things. So thank you very much for your information.
Chairman Morgan.
Director Hassler.
Council, I'd like to make a recommendation of call the EPA in. I mean, bring them in, put them on the spot to answer these questions. I mean, that's what we were trying to do through this letter. We had requested a couple times due to scheduling conflicts. They didn't make it, but you guys will carry some weight. Make that request for them to come in, provide a presentation. Like I said, we asked for them to come in October when this was announced. We tried to get them here before we did the comment letter. Just the holidays, some scheduling conflicts with them, a change in administration. I mean, I'm not making excuses for them. It was just a difficult time. But that's my recommendation: is essentially ask it, and get an answer from the horse's mouth.
Thank you, Director Hassler. On the question, Commissioner Boyle, then Commissioner Fisher. I don't think the light works.
Okay, now I got the mic on. That'll help. Chairman Hassler and John, I just have we had a conversation last week, and you explained to me why you can't get the lead abatement down to 100. Can you explain why that can't go that low for everybody?
Director Hassler.
Chairman Morgan, Commissioner Boyle. The EPA under CERCLA can't require a cleanup to be conducted below levels that would be what they consider naturally occurring with urban inputs. In the proposed plan, they made the determination for our community through their methods that, I mean, again, I said it once before, I'm not a toxicologist, so I can't get into the brass tacks of it. They said our urban concentration for Butte without mining impacts is 135. So they cannot require a cleanup that would be below what would be in a community similar to ours, sans mining impacts. They made the determination that that level is 135. I hope that answers your question.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Eric, I think you do a great job, and in no way I'm insinuating, but what I'm saying, more or less, is what I'm saying is, without the funds, you can't do the work. And my fear is, we drag this out much over, we might not have an EPA in 10 years. We might not have an EPA in 5 years. I mean, to dragging this out to 15 years or 10 years or 80%, this EPA thing could fall apart any time. We've been dealing with this way too long. And in my opinion, you know, EPA and ARCO BP are pretty friendly with one another compared to Butte-Silver Bow and EPA, or EPA and ARCO BP compared to Butte-Silver Bow and either one of the entities. You know, so I'm a little concerned about what's going to happen in the future. So I like your recommendation of calling the EPA. And I mean, I don't know, you know, I can make a motion that we hold this one more time, and I don't think we have to get this letter out here this week. I think we've got until, you know, postmark this letter prior to February 14th at midnight. So if we got this letter sent out later and requested, you know, just send them back a letter and say, you know, the council commissioners request that you come before us and answer our questions, then we'll submit a letter. You know, maybe that's an idea. I don't know, Chairman Morgan, maybe you could weigh in on something like that. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Just timeline-wise, if this communication was held in committee of the whole for another week, there would not be another regular meeting before the 14th deadline. So this council would not be able to take final action on the communication because there's no regular meeting to do so. Because even though there is a committee of the whole meeting next week, official action is not taken at a committee of the whole. So that would require a special meeting to be published and everything to be presented, to be voted on next Wednesday, to make the post office date of the 14th. So that was, as I discussed a few weeks ago, that's the caveat with that. We do have a meeting, but it's not final action to authorize the chief executive to sign this communication. Does that answer your question, Commissioner Fisher?
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. That does answer the question, and it does get to the point. I just have a feeling that without changing the timeline in here and the 80% and things like that, you know, I guess from when I did a little bit of education when I was in high school and stuff, if you take a true-false test and there's one thing false, you don't mark it true. And the thing is, it's not true. I'm not happy with the 9-year. I'm not happy with the 15-year. I'm not happy with that stuff. So it's pretty hard for me to vote yes on this, although I think Commissioner O'Leary done a fabulous job. It's a great letter. But, I mean, are we accepting something that is a little more than what we really want? I mean, you know, if we could amend this letter to just answer a few of the questions of some of the people that have been in this fight for a long time, like, you know, they mentioned, if we could just amend a few sentences in that, redline a couple more things, I'd be more than happy to support it, but I'm having a tough time supporting it the way it's written. Thank you.
Okay, there is a motion on the floor that has been seconded. What does the council want to do to proceed? Commissioner Mankins.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. I mean, we've talked about different things. I mean, we're getting down to that 11th hour, and I know it's not for another week, and you'd have to do some different things in order for that to happen. But I know, like, we're trying to pick out these diamonds, as Mr. Barrett has said, and we continue to pick and we pick and we pick, and no one seems to we don't get the right letter. It seems like Commissioner Morgan has stated this 4 to 5 weeks now on what the process had to be done, and now we're back here when we knew it was going to be somewhat approved, and then we get one more adjustment, and then another group comes forward and makes 4 or 5 more suggestions. I mean, when is it going to be that final thing? So we all know that it has to get to that final next week if it was going to happen, but we can't agree to it. It just doesn't seem like everybody's agreeing on what. We have the one main thing, additional time, no cost for Butte-Silver Bow. The parameter of the Summit Valley or where it's going to be, but we don't have enough buy-in. I don't understand. Evan, you've been here every single week for these last 4 or 5 weeks, and we've never got to this exact same diamond. Every week it's a different diamond comes up. You pick through it, and it's a different diamond that we're focusing on. I mean, everybody's heard. Thank you, Commissioner O'Leary, for coming up with this, trying to make some kind of compensation or trying to make the letter better for the public that he has spoke with or has spoke with him. He's been in conveyance with Director Hassler. And I think Mr. Baird has even been in direct contact with Director Hassler on these different things. I just don't see why we haven't come up with this, and all of a sudden now it's tonight something different with specific language instead of saying, I think it was said, well, we didn't have specific, we needed specific language. We've always said in the last 5 weeks that we needed specific language to do this letter because there's, all of us and then the public, we need specific language. And we haven't done that. The public hasn't done that either. That's where we're at with this. So we just got to figure out on where we're going to move forward. I think right now the language, nobody's agreeing on the time frame. The time frame is terrible. We all are in agreement with that. If we said 9 years, I think even if Commissioner O'Leary would have put 9 years in that, I think it would have came back, why isn't it 8 years? Why isn't it 7 years? Why isn't it 5 years? But we can't, nobody can really give us that direct on when that cleanup is really going to happen. But I don't know what to do with this at this juncture right now. I'm very perplexed in it right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Mankins. Commissioner Olson, no, geez, Callahan.
Thank you, Chairman.
I'm just coming out of retirement, so give me a minute.
Thank you, John. Hey, I guess my question would be, the answer, we're never going to come up with the perfect answer. I appreciate everything you're saying, Eric, and Mr. O'Leary, you've done a great job on this letter. We're never going to get it perfect. And I'm not saying we got to take shortcuts and hurry up and get something done, but I know myself, I've always asked Eric questions. He's always been straightforward with me. I've always trusted what Eric told me. I guess my suggestion is, why don't we ask Eric's opinion on what we should do? What do you think, Mr. Hassler?
Director
Chairman
Hassler.
Morgan, Councilman Callahan. That's a bit of a loaded question, Commissioner. I mean, I'm the drafter of the original letter. There's a reason as to why we put every aspect of that letter in there. And I still am of a firm belief that the questions are valuable. We know the time frame is unacceptable. We agree. It's just, it is very difficult to say you have to do something in 5 years when you, or 10 years, or whatever it is, when you don't even know what something is. I mean, that's the key to this in my mind, is we have to get to the bottom of what the end result is, what the project actually entails. And right now, until we receive the answers in there, even the boundary, I mean, we had discussed this earlier, just a few minutes ago, is they did their assumptions based off of the boundary as it's drawn. We asked for at least Census Tract 6. That's probably a couple thousand more homes. We're hearing the Summit Valley. That could be several thousand more homes. We don't know what that looks like. There's not a lot of data outside of BPSOU to really forecast what that looks like. And remember, underneath the 2019 and 2020 unilateral administrative order, the whole Summit Valley is covered in the expanded RMAP area. That will remain in place, is my understanding. I mean, this will go through a legal battle. Trust me, this is not settled here within the next, I don't even want to speculate how long this will take. But there is coverage throughout the Summit Valley. There is a science behind this that they utilize to determine where is, I mean, there's a reason why priority soils is named priority soils, is that was where it was determined that the most impacts were, that you have to be more aggressive in this particular area than you may have to be somewhere else. Now they've expanded that aggressiveness. We had a little miscommunication earlier that We have to reach out to property owners. Every one of them within the BPSOU boundary that is in place today, that is the assumption moving forward, that anybody that falls within the new BPSOU boundary, it is a requirement that we have to reach out to them. But that's as far as we can go. I mean, we've reached out to everybody within BPSOU at least once, if not multiple times, and short of, I don't know how you get to participation without having a heavy hammer that only the EPA can provide. So I hope that kind of answered your question. It just right now, I think in regards to it, that the letter with Commissioner O'Leary's edits is solid. I mean, I think it gets to the point of what is in this proposed plan, knowing this is the key word, proposed. This is a proposed plan. This will go through iterations. I mean, that's just how this process works. They will take the feedback that they receive and modify accordingly. That's how the process is supposed to work. So just because what's in there today does not mean that's what's in there tomorrow. So.
Any follow-up?
I guess I could do a follow-up.
Go ahead.
What would you think if we just took a number out of there and just put the proper language on the quality, efficient, and accurate cleanup in the best time period? Or
Chairman Morgan,
Director
Commissioner
Hassler.
Callahan, I believe that's how the first draft was. I understand that there needs to be, I mean, we went that it needs to be done in an efficient, effective, and implementable manner, you know, without calling out a time frame. A time frame seems to be essential. So, but to be blunt, right now, a time frame of any sort is a guess. It's a swag. I mean, that's about the best anybody can do until we have some of those questions answered. Is how big is the area? How many homes does this really encompass? What truly is the hot rate? You know, you've heard opportunity is a potential repository. That's 22 miles away. That adds time. I mean, these things are all implications on a time frame that need to be considered moving forward. And I would hate to set a false expectation for something that is impossible to implement. And I'm fearful of that.
thank you.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Healy.
I think what I heard the gentleman when they were speaking is that this is a multi-billion-dollar company. So why is cost and time an issue when they have the resource to pay for the job to get done?
Director Hassler.
Chairman Morgan, Commissioner Healy, I don't feel anywhere in our letter we've called out cost.
Okay.
I mean, the allocation agreement, I'll admit, it's antiquated. I mean, it was developed in 2006 underneath a completely different parameter of work. It needs to be updated. Commissioner Fisher has spoke that it seems to be on delay that you've heard for 4 years. We're shooting at a moving target. I mean, we don't even know what that end result is. Again, it would be no different than trying to set a time frame at this point to put a dollar amount to it without knowing what the end project actually entails. Again, would be a guess. And that's a fearful place to put staff in, is to try to take a guess at best on what this project is going to cost until you know what the project is.
Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Eric, thank you. I would make a substitute motion at this time. We hold it in abeyance.
Okay, there's been a substitute motion made to hold this in abeyance, also known as Committee of the Whole, that's been seconded by Commissioner Healy. Is there anything on the question? Commissioner Thatcher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Just really quick, I want to make one more quick point, and that is that there have been obviously many comments regarding children's health. Mr. Patrice brought it up, and Ms. Boysa. God willing, I get the opportunity to be a mom someday. I haven't yet, but many people in this room have, grandparents, aunts, uncles. So be it. But the last thing that I would ever do is put anybody's health at the back burner of anything or anyone. And I just want that point to be made clear, and I feel like that would be the same for every commissioner up here. I don't think any member of the Reclamations Department I mean, they have children, some of them do. They're raising their children here too. They're not making decisions, none of us are making decisions lightly about the health of anybody in this community, whether it be people I know and love, or whether it be a stranger on the street. I wanted to address you on that point is people's health is of utmost priority to me before we make a decision on this too, just so you know. Thank you.
Okay, there is a substitute motion on the floor. As everybody knows, since there is two, if you vote in that order from the substitute motion. If that fails, you go back to the first motion. So is there anything on the question? Commissioner Shea.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just would like you to please explain the timeline one more time. I know, I'm sorry. And also the process by which this would have to be approved next week, no later than at a special meeting next week. Would you just please cover that again?
Sure, I'll try. So really, a special meeting will have to be called by Chief Executive Gallagher to discuss this meeting. County Attorney Enruth, please correct me if I'm incorrect, but he would have to call a special meeting to order and to talk about this exact communication, because that's the only time final action would be accepted. I'm assuming that he would, can't say that he will. I don't know how that process goes, so could be a gamble, might not be, kind of a thing. And I think that's about it, right? Okay, County Attorney Enruth, anything to add?
Chairman Morgan, yes, that is correct. It'd be the same process that we used last week with regards to the communication that was provided to the council regarding the issue with the coroner. Chief Executive Gallagher would request to suspend the rules to bring in the special meeting. We would separate that out from the committee of the whole meeting and go from there. Identical to what we did last week.
Commissioner Shea, did that answer your question?
It answered the question that I already knew, but I wanted it restated for the public.
Okay.
Thank you, County Attorney Enruth.
Okay, so the motion before you is to hold communication 2025-18 in the committee of the whole. Is there anything on the question? Everybody understand the motion? Okay, the council's ready. Please vote. Okay, would any commissioner like to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
4 yeas, 6 nay.
Okay, so motion fails. So now we'll go to the first motion, which is to approve communication. I got that right? The motion failed? The motion failed? Yes. Just, okay. We'll go to the first motion, which is to approve or concur with communication 2025-18 as amended by Commissioner O'Leary and place this communication on file. Is there anything on the question? Does everybody understand what the motion is that you're voting on? Commissioner O'Leary?
I guess my only comment would be, I don't have any particular, I'm not tied to any particular number in this document. If somebody would like to amend this, for a couple years difference on this, I have no particular opposition to that, if that would make this more palatable to some of the commissioners. But again, I'm not. I came at this from a pragmatic standpoint. I'm looking at this like a person who's trying to be reasonable, and I recognize that the 10 years, 15 years, 80% and completion it's a wild guess, and I feel like 5 years at 100% completion is also a wild guess. So yeah, I don't really have any particular opposition to an amendment to this, but I don't know how exactly that would happen.
Is that a question, Commissioner O'Leary, or is that right now the motion that's before you right now is to concur this as stated? So that's the motion that's on the floor that you would be voting on. Commissioner Callahan.
Thank you. I think Eric would like to respond to that.
Director Hassler.
Chairman Morgan, my response is not in regards to that, but I just want some clarification on the process. We were operating underneath the idea that we would be filtered the comments from the council, not receiving them from general public members. I want to know, let the group know, I did see Evan Barrett's write-up, but it came to me. It didn't come through, it came from Evan. It didn't come through the council. So some clarity, if we're going to keep this and hold it and make additional edits, would be valuable to the department and staff as to where we're fielding these from. Because again, the past meetings, my understanding was they'd be filtered through you guys. They'd be provided to us through councilmen. So just asking for clarity.
Commissioner Shea.
We're not holding it. That motion failed.
Oh.
I'm sorry. You guys were visiting.
Thank you, Commissioner Shea. I was kind of wondering that myself. So, Commissioner Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. You know, I have no problem with it going the way it is either, but the thing about it is the letter's going to be from Butte-Silver Chief Executive J.P. Gallagher and Chairman John Morgan. Chief Executive Gallagher's not here to voice his opinion about whether he approves this letter or not. And we've heard no comment from the Chief Executive, who's going to be signing this letter along with yourself. So, I mean, that's, to me, is kind of taking him out of the picture, and it's the ball's in his court. So, I mean, I'm not sure that's a relative comment, but, I mean, if I was in his shoes, I would rather be able to read the letter and visit with my constituents and my council members to see if I really want to sign this letter, because we're going to say tonight, vote yes, he's going to sign this letter, and you're going to sign it, and JP's going to, you know, he might say, hey, I'm signing something that I didn't author, you know, so.
Thank you, Commissioner Fisher. Just to clarify that, this communication is before the Council of Commissioners to authorize the Chief Executive to sign it. So we're approving for him to sign it. We're not giving him the option of signing it or not. So it kind of takes that part out of it in the sense. I would be signing it as the chairman of the council, regardless of my personal decision on if I agree or disagree. I have to go with what the vote of the commission is. And so I would be voting it I would be signing it in the same manner as the chief executive at that point. I would be signing it on your all vote. So that's where that would be coming from. So the motion that's on the floor is to approve communication 2025-18 as amended by Commissioner O'Leary and place on file. Is there anything on the question? Fisher.
Thank you, Chairman Morgan. Well, if this passes, we adopt the letter. If it doesn't pass, do we go back to the original letter, or what do we do if it doesn't pass?
Commissioner Fisher, if this motion does fail, it becomes open again, and then a commissioner could make a follow-up motion. They start over, if you will. So there could be another motion after this if it does fail. County Attorney Enruth, just clarification. I always like legal. Thank you. All right. Do you want me to restate the motion? Okay. Anything on the question? Would the council please vote? Okay, would anyone like to change their vote? Would the clerk please record the vote?
8 yea, 2 nay.
Okay, the motion passes. Moving on in the agenda to Section 3, ordinances and resolutions introduced to judiciary. Please take note of resolution number 2025-01, 2025-02, number 3, resolution 2025-03, number 4, resolution number 2025-04, number 5, resolution number 2025-07, number 6, resolution number 2025-08, They are referred to the Judiciary Committee. Next item on the agenda is calendar of other meetings and events. Please take note of the different meetings that are happening in the next week or so. Moving on to any public comment on any matter that's not on the agenda. Now is an opportunity for any member of the public to speak on anything that is not on tonight's agenda. Seeing none, I would ask for a motion to adjourn. Motion made and seconded to adjourn. Anything on the question? All those in favor? All those opposed? Motion passes. Thank you and have a good night, everyone.